With the Kafka rerun in just a few days, today I'm here with a video that should be informative to you on reasons why you should and should not summon, including reasons of the ups and downs of Kafka before buff, and now why she's very valuable, even more than she was previously now with her buff. Talking about her being a cornerstone, and then something you really do want to consider, as it did happen to DoT once, so it might happen again, and then reasons why you should and shouldn't summon. So to kick it off, Kafka did get buffed. She is the cornerstone of DoT once again. She still was before the buff, but she was a very outdated character as she did release in 1.2. She had a lot of flaws in her kit where, her follow-up attack couldn't get triggered. Unless someone else used a basic attack, you could only have one charge, and you only had that charge refresh on her turn. The way you built her was also completely different than now. Previously, you built her as a proper DPS, 4-piece Pioneer, and at the time Glamoth. In this case, it would be Revelry if you still did the same thing. But pretty much you would build her as a full-on DPS. Now, it's completely different. You build her as a speedy DoT procer, where her entire role is to just provide that massive attack percent buff for your team, and also be the one to proc the DoTs herself. As her multipliers are very low, she doesn't really do that much damage, her shock itself doesn't do crazy damage. It's mainly the other characters that are on the team that are going to be what is helped. So Kafka before, she was very outdated. Again, one follow-up attack. The follow-up attack only triggered when you did use a basic attack on someone for the team, so it couldn't just be any attack, it had to be someone else's basic attack. She could inflict shock, and the only thing is she still could proc every DoT with her skill, but her ultimate can only proc every actual shock state, not every DoT. And her follow-up attack didn't even have a proc, so that was also another thing. So with the buff kit, they didn't really work with their multipliers or anything and how the shock state does work. What they did instead was actually raise up the amount of the DoT procs of the damage you would do. Previously, the skill would only proc the DoT on the enemy you did attack that was primarily, and it only did the 75% of the original damage. The buff one now actually does 50% of the original damage to the adjacent targets. As I mentioned, her ultimate previously only did shock stay, and now she's able to proc every DoT to 120% of the original damage. So not only does every DoT get proc now, it's also higher than the original damage, which previously was 100% before the buff. And her follow-up attack was tweaked as well, where now she actually can get 2 charges, and her ultimate can also give her a charge. And now it's not just gated to anyone using a basic attack. You don't have to force yourself to use a basic attack. You can now actually just use any attack and she'll throw it out. And the follow-up attack can proc DoTs. She also had a big change to her A2, which pretty much did change her role entirely. I did forget to mention this. The DoT previously actually was able to do all DoTs with the bonus trace. I kind of forgot about it. It's been a while since I read her old kit. But yeah, her previous A2 was the one that made the actual ultimate do all DoT sources. But yeah, once she got buffed, they moved it over to the actual ultimate itself, and they changed that trace entirely to make her a support at the same time. Now she's able to increase allies' attack if they have 75% effect hit rate or higher, which her primary teammates, Hyacinth and Black Swan, are built with a lot more than that. And if they do hit that threshold, they get 100% attack, which is absolutely insane. 100% attack increase is just absurd. Attack percent is one of the only sources that DoT characters actually do get a damage increase of, so her giving that big attack just increased everyone's DoTs across the board, and if you were able to hit the requirement for Kafka herself, she also got the big jump. But as I mentioned, you don't really focus on her damage anymore. And then her A6 was also changed. Previously, it was increasing the base chance for the targets to get shocked by her follow-up attack, technique, or ultimate by 30%. Then they completely changed it to where the ultimate restores a follow-up attack. The talent's follow-up attack can now proc the DoTs equal to 80% of the original damage. So pretty much they evolved her role from being, still the DPS, but mainly the enabler of DoT, to still being the enabler of DoT and making it strong, while also being a super good, practically budget harmony support for the team. And also the one to proc the DoTs, which usually you still technically get the most damage sources of. She's really the only one that can proc them outside of Hyacinth's ultimate. So that's how she went from the cornerstone of DoT, which fell off a lot because she was outdated. DoT itself didn't really have much. Hyacinth's coming out and now also becoming a lot better as a cornerstone of DoT. Okay, now I do want to talk about 2 things you want to consider with the DoT team in general, and obviously this does include Kafka. So Kafka herself, this buff is really good. With Black Swan and whatever team setup you're doing, you definitely can clear a lot easier and a lot more comfier than you were able to previously. But right now, MOC and all the stuff that's kind of helping with DoT and also increasing the hell out of skill damage as well, which, does apply to DoT characters because they want to spam skill as much as possible outside of Black Swan. It's going to get a lot harder when bosses are a lot more, tanky and such, obviously, haha, HP inflation that affects everyone, but HP inflation really did hit DoT the most. because at some point, DoT really just did not do enough damage. So that could very much happen again with how the game's going. We have characters like Finon, who, you know, his meteors can do up to like 2 million damage. Not saying DoTs can't, like DoTs can do millions off procs now, mainly with high ceilings. So something you do want to consider is DoT is, for some reason, besides Break, the biggest archetype that is prone to falling off. Like, they still have the problems where if an enemy acts too much, it can expire the DoTs and, you know, maybe even do too much damage for you if you're doing a sustainless one, if you really need that extra damage. Or the case where enemies may act too slow. This was kind of countered with the fact that now Kafka has a bunch of more ways to proc the DoTs. High ceilings herself can proc the DoTs, but sometimes they might have a lot of HP, but act really little. Kafka can proc as many DoTs as possible. High ceilings, that's not really something you're looking at because she doesn't get her ultimate, you know, a bunch of times. It's like once every 3 to 4 turns. So that problem still is something that lingers for DoT that definitely can get expanded where an enemy acts super slow and just has a bunch of HP. Or an enemy like, you know, Hule gets the 50 millionth buff where maybe his speed, instead of being 5,000, it's like 5 million and he attacks like 17 times in a turn. Obviously, I'm exaggerating that, but, you know, just saying they could make another boss like Hule, or Hule himself keeps getting buffed, where he attacks a bunch, can expire the DoTs, end up killing you even. So DoT did get a lot of fixes where it now does a lot of damage, you have more sources to proc it, but that kind of source that, like, it just has to be really prone for falling off still definitely lingers. With the game direction, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Another thing is just look how long it took for DoT to really get a buff. The last thing before Kafka buffs and high ceilings was Black Swan. That was in 2.1. We're going into 3.5. That is insane. So 3.4, the addition of Kafka buffs. Before that was Black Swan. There is no telling that maybe we're getting Kafka buff now, high ceilings, and suddenly they forget about DoT again. And, you know, maybe the next buff is in 5.x. So definitely consider that, because, you know, it's a pure archetype that is very different from traditional hypercarry. Traditional hypercarry, and for some reason follow-up attacks is like a safe bet, because usually a lot of characters have a form of a follow-up attack, their damage, and also those follow-up attack characters can also be ran as a traditional hypercarry. Like a traditional hypercarry face out is very strong. Those characters obviously are less to be prone to falling off just because they get so many supports for them, and that role specifically. That's another thing to consider, is DoT characters kind of can have it rough sometimes when it comes to supports, because a lot of supports end up providing stuff for these hypercarry characters like crit, which crit is completely useless for DoT characters. That's why you really never run someone like Sunday or Sparkle or Bronya on the crit team, and look at Sunday, one of the most used supports in the game right now. So, you know, having less tailor-made supports, so you're probably going to be stuck with the same team of triple DoT, so high ceilings, Kafka, and Black Swan, plus sustain or sustainless, or maybe 2 of them, and then 1 support or sustain, and then, you know, you swap between those. Last thing I want to consider is she is very much wanting high ceilings to last as long as possible. I'm sure this is not really going to be a problem for most people. If you're a Kafka enjoyer, you're a DoT enjoyer, you definitely have stuff saved for high ceilings. Or in this case, you're wanting to get into it, so you have summons for Kafka. But I do definitely want to say, if you want to get Kafka, definitely recommend picking up high ceilings as well. It's like high ceilings without Kafka is pretty yikes, but you can use Kafka with just like Black Swan and stuff, so that's still possible. But high ceilings is definitely going to make Kafka last as long as possible, because straight up high ceilings implants every single DoT. Well, inflicts, I said implants, lol. She inflicts every single DoT, which makes the whole proccing of DoTs from Kafka so much stronger, because now instead of just shock and wind shear if you're running Black Swan, and if you're not running Black Swan, you're running something like Shouch or even Go Knifin', it just burn. High ceilings lets you proc wind shear, shock, bleed, burn, everything at the same time. So that's one thing to definitely consider. You probably are going to want to pick up high ceilings if you are going for Kafka. Not just Kafka, you want to get both. And now reasons why you should and shouldn't summon. So practically the entire video kind of gave you reasons why, but to kind of just dumb it down, if you're okay with the fact that DoT might get the cold shoulder treatment again and not get any updates outside of high ceilings for, you know, up to 5.x even, you're okay with playing that gamble and you're okay with just doing that, then that's going to be good. If you're in need of another team, that's going to be good, because DoT, even though I'm saying they are prone to falling off, that doesn't mean they're weak. They're going to be really strong. And one of the core reasons is if you're also going to be willing and you are able to pick up high ceilings. Again, as I mentioned, Kafka and Black Swan together, and then whatever team setup, they can definitely work, especially now with Kafka's buffs. They can definitely work without high ceilings, but high ceilings is going to be a very crucial unit you definitely want to consider for the future, and also now. Black Swan plus Kafka plus high ceilings, you don't really even need Black Swan. I'm just saying her in a case you do have her, but even if you don't have Black Swan, just Kafka high ceilings yourself. That is the cornerstone now. Those two units together are super strong, and that is going to be what you want to run for as long as possible. So if you are summoning for Kafka, you definitely want to consider picking up Hycelines, and if you can't pick up Hycelines, that's going to be a bit rough. So again, if you need another team, or even if you don't, you just need another team that you want to use, the primary reason would be that you need another team. You're okay with the whole DoT issues that I mentioned in the video already, and you're also able to pick up Hycelines, then I do definitely recommend picking up Kafka, as she will be really strong for those reasons. And when it comes to reasons why you shouldn't summon, it is practically just the opposite. If you don't really need many more characters on your account, you already have two well-built teams that clear endgame for you, you have one for all modes to get full rewards, then why even bother? You better save your currency for something else. If you're very iffy on the whole DoT falling off thing, like you want to get into it, but you don't want to like go just completely unnoticed and potentially have the whole issue all over again, then that could be a very fair reason to just stay out of it and just go chase other characters. And also, if you don't want to or you're unable to pull for Hycelines as well, this is a bit less so because you can definitely just consider on a rerun. Like I mentioned again, Kafka now can still definitely clear with, you know, Black Swan or whatever setup you're doing as long as you have good builds. But if you straight up don't want to get Hycelines, then you're really going to be nerfing her by a lot because I mentioned everything Hycelines does is so good. She has debuffs such as Defense Shred, which is great for DoT characters. She inflicts every single DoT to make every proc do millions of damage up to even. It's actually insane how good that is. So if you really don't want to pull for Hycelines, like even now or a rerun, then I don't really recommend picking up Kafka because she will not last for as long as you would as if she did have Hycelines. But if you are in the case where you want to get Hycelines as well, but you have to wait to rerun, then that's still fine. You can still pick up Kafka now and get Hycelines later. But yeah, again, those would be the reasons. That does wrap it up, going over the ups and downs of Kafka, the problems with DoTs that you do want to consider, especially with Kafka, reasons why you should and shouldn't summon, and so on. Comment down below if you are going to be pulling for Kafka herself. If you did find this video helpful, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this along with all other types of Star Wars content, and I'll see you later. Peace out.